On a winter evening in January 2011, a university campus in British Columbia was slowly winding down. Classes were over, lights glowed softly inside lecture halls, and students moved through parking lots thinking about nothing more than getting home. In a space meant to feel ordinary, familiar, and safe, something unthinkable was about to happen. Quick, targeted, and irreversible. That evening, a young woman was gone, and an entire community was left to understand how this violence arrived. This is the story of that one evening, of that one campus, and of Maple Batalia. Hi everyone, welcome to the Desi Crime Podcast, a show where we dive deep into some of the craziest cases from around South Asia. I'm your host Aishwarya.
And I'm Aryaan.
And the case that I have for you today is truly heartbreaking, but one that also is nostalgic because it reminds us of someone from a lot of our childhoods.
Aishwarya, we're back in the studio.
We are.
I'm back in Delhi.
Yes.
After a long time.
Mhm.
And I must say, I miss Mumbai.
Why?
I can, while the AQI in Mumbai isn't the best in the world, it is far better than here.
How much is it? We
it's-
kind of saw a drop in our AQI recently as well here.
Yeah, but your drop is like going from 10,000 to 5,000. I
We're
don't know,
in the
it's a-
200s right now.
Sure. So is Mumbai, by the way, 200 something. But I don't believe you guys, because trust me, this is not like,
Sure.
yeah, the data might look similar, the experience is
Sure.
different. But no, I'm glad to be back in the studio with the team, with everybody, and yeah, this is one of just like that, another one of those cases that I haven't heard of before. So start the new year with a banger case, and before we do that, guys, Happy New Year to all of you.
Yeah.
The same old, buy the Desi Crime book, become a patron if you can, hit the subscribe button.
Links in the bio, buttons in
If
the bio.
you guys
everything's
get
in the
bored of
bio.
it, we do get bored of it too, but we have to say it. And a small apology for some of our OG listeners for my, sorry for interrupting your music. I know that ad's been bugging a few.
We have a meme in our midst.
Have you ever? Yeah, I mean, you guys should be honored by my presence. But anyway, with that, let's get started with the case for today.
In the late evening hours of September 27, 2011, the third level parking structure of Simon Fraser University's Surrey campus was quiet and still, even as 19-year-old Maple Batalia walked through it alone and made her way towards her parked car. For the last few hours, Maple had been exactly where she loved to be, deep in her studies, dreaming of the future. She and one of her closest friends, Karen Kang, had stayed late at the SFU Surrey campus library, powering through a study session for the upcoming exams. Now, with the study session over, as they both walked their separate ways to their own cars, little did they know that they had been stalked, watched, observed, and followed the entire night on campus. Two people had made the campus their hunting ground, trailing Maple's steps in a white Dodge Charger as she walked to the library, then walked from the library to a cafe for a late-night coffee, then walked back to the library to continue studying, and now walked to the parking structure. She didn't know that as she approached her car on the third level, the white Dodge Charger was already parked in a quiet corner, engine off. And then suddenly, the quiet of the parking structure late at night was shattered by the sound of gunfire. In the dimly lit concrete garage, Maple Batalia collapsed next to her car. She had been ambushed and brutally attacked, shot 3 times, and then slashed repeatedly with a knife as she was leaving campus after her study session. Blood slowly pooled on the cold concrete beneath her. Within moments, the eerie quiet was replaced by absolute chaos. Panicked 911 calls rang out and sirens blared in the distance. A campus security guard had sprinted towards the sound of the shots, heart pounding, and found the horrific scene. Maple lying on the ground, bleeding profusely but somehow still clinging to life. Her textbooks and papers were scattered, slicked with blood under the harsh fluorescent lights. An RCMP officer, Daniel Johnson, arrived and dropped to Maple's side, taking in the sight of the grievously wounded young woman. She was lying on the ground, blood everywhere, he later recalled. Maple's once radiant smile was pale and her face splattered with crimson. Her breath had become shallow and strained. The officer gently cradled her head, trying to keep her conscious as her eyes fluttered and her lips moved. She was trying to speak. Corporal Johnson leaned in closer, hoping to catch even a whisper, but Maple's injuries were too severe. Blood from a knife slash to her head gushed, choking off any words. "Who did this to you?" the officer wanted to ask, but there was no time and no answer. Maple could only manage soft, inaudible gasps. Johnson's heart ached at the sight of her pain. Quote, "I remember telling her I was going to do everything I could in my power and my training to try and save her," he later said. Under the wail of ambulance sirens pulling up, he squeezed Maple's hand, assuring her that help had arrived. The young woman, barely out of her teens, was fighting for her life.
Ash, this is a scene we see in films very often where there is this sort of debate or animosity between the doctors and the police, because the police wants answers, the doctors want to save the life.
Sure.
In this situation, I can see part of this investigator's instinct is, tell me who did this to you, but his overarching responsibility is, I need to save you
Save your
first.
life.
But those two things are opposite to each other, because if she doesn't survive this, right, and I don't know if she does, but if she doesn't survive this, that was the only chance for the
to get
testimony.
any answer at
So
all.
what, I'm sure their training must include these scenarios. I just wonder what their SOP would be.
It must be really hard wanting her to speak up in that
Yeah.
moment, wanting to maybe have her sit up straight, maybe someone get her water so she can
Yeah.
talk, but then you just have this person dying in your
Yeah.
arms and all you kind of want to do is
I-
rush them.
In movies, I'm always pissed at the doctors when they're like, "No, right now the patient
can't
is
talk to
sensitive."
them.
I'm like, "No, just let them talk.
Just
Just
2 minutes,
do.
please."
I want to know."
No,
Yeah.
I get that.
But in a real life scenario, this can happen, and I'd love to Google what the training. Is.
This would be. Soon after, paramedics swarmed the scene and lifted Maple onto a gurney. As they rushed her to the ambulance, police officers fanned out across the garage, guns drawn, unsure if the attacker was still nearby. The flashing red and blue lights illuminated concrete pillars and empty parked cars, but the assailant was gone into the night. So then the investigators began combing the area and quickly found evidence of the attack. Spent 9mm shell casings glittering on the ground, and Maple's blood splattered across the pavement. A bullet hole pierced a nearby concrete wall too. Witnesses were scarce at this late hour, but a few students who had been studying late reported hearing bangs through the parking structure and a car screeching away. Police secured the scene with crime tape, realizing they stood at the center of a vicious assault. The brutality, close-range gunfire followed by a knife attack, had already signaled that this may not be a random robbery or stray campus violence. It felt personal. In the ambulance, medics fought to stabilize Maple's failing body. She had a faint pulse, but multiple gunshot wounds and deep knife gashes had pushed her to the brink. Every second counted. The vehicle screeched towards the Royal Columbian Hospital, where trauma surgeons awaited. As dawn neared, Maple Batalia's family would be waking up to every parent's worst nightmare. Their beloved daughter, a promising health sciences student and aspiring actress, had been gravely wounded in an attack on her campus. The question tearing through everyone's mind was why? Who could have harbored such hate for Maple, a bright and beautiful 19-year-old? And where was that person now? To understand those questions and their answers, and to understand how this night came to be, we need to step back in time. Maple Batalia grew up as the cherished youngest daughter in a loving Sikh family in Surrey, British Columbia. Born in 1992, she was raised among a close-knit community of Indian immigrants, attending Gurudwara with her parents and her older sister Rosaline. But unlike some conservative Desi households, Maple's family gave their daughter the freedom to explore and dream big. Quote, she was allowed to go outside, play with boys, and just kind of be free, which is kind of taboo in our culture, remembered her close friend Karen Kang. And maybe because of that freedom, from a young age, Maple was full of ambition and talent. She truly dreamed big. One week she wanted to be a doctor, the next an astronaut. She talked of becoming a model, of seeing her name in movie lights. Quote, she always had big dreams, Karen said fondly. Incredibly, many of those dreams were already taking shape while Maple was still in her teens. By 14, Maple had landed her first runway modeling gig, strutting down catwalks with poise beyond her years. She later earned a post modeling in Vancouver Fashion Week, looking beautiful on a ramp with her confidence and radiant smile. With no limits in her mind, Maple soon after also enrolled in acting classes and secured an agent, inching closer to her Hollywood aspirations. And her hard work paid off. In 2010, Maple scored a small role in the major feature film, The Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Roderick Rules, appearing on the big screen, a moment she could barely believe was real.
I have to go find my friend.
Yeah, I know.
You know, self-admittedly, a large part of my childhood involved reading and then rereading and then rereading all of the Diary of Wimpy Kid franchisee. Later in life, as I've grown older, when I've told women that that's I loved it. I've been met with weird gazes. To
Why?
say the
Why is
least.
that? Because I know nothing about The Diary of a Wimpy Kid. I just know Aryaan has been a fan.
I think and the female listeners might or might not agree or might scoff at me and my entire personality, but I think if they have a younger brother, they just might be accustomed to the brother reading that and acting goofy, because it's a very goofy guy's book.
Sure.
Like, it's a very goofy guy's book.
Okay.
I know I'd still enjoy it.
And his demography is guys? I didn't know
Yes,
that.
100.
Okay.
It's the opposite of the Desi Crime TG. It is
Sure.
it is complete opposite.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I saw the film, and guys, if you're just listening to the podcast, Ash said that she is pretty, and
Yeah, she's
we
beautiful.
we have a tendency to do this for victims like in the crime space. People do this. This girl was beautiful. She was beautiful.
Yeah.
But I'm very conflicted when, I know this is a tangent, but when people start modeling at the age of 14,
It is a very...
minors modeling it's icky to me.
100%. I think the acting space is also one that makes me feel the same way,
Mhm.
but it also obviously raises the question of who's going to act as children in
Yeah.
movies, where I think kind of past the time where men are dressing up as women and can play those roles and whatnot. But modeling for sure, it just feels like
Yeah.
such a tainted space. And early exposure just
And
feels so
also
scary.
It is sexualized,
Yeah,
like
100%.
modeling, or a large part of it is the the physical attraction. That
And I
is a
think
big
we've
part.
gotten better with that over time. We have
100%.
much more diverse array of models
Yeah,
now.
but I want adult diverse models. I don't like minors in that space. It's just, to me, again, pageants and all of the murky waters.
little
But
off.
yeah.
She even got to film a cute little teenagey on-screen kiss for a popular CW television series called The Secret Circle. And this entire time, as her dreams took shape, Maple's friends stood right by her, accompanying her to her movie premieres, cheering loudly when her face lit up the screen. Karen Kang recalls Maple sitting among the audience with tears of joy in her eyes, overwhelmed that her childhood fantasy of acting was coming true. At school, Maple was equally successful, a straight A student who planned to become a doctor. In fact, if you think she couldn't have managed that with everything else happening, you're wrong, because by 2011, she had graduated high school and enrolled as a health sciences student at SFU's Surrey campus, aiming for a career in dermatology. In every sphere of life, Maple seemed to shine. It was around the age of 15 then, in the middle of all of this, amid this whirlwind of achievements, that Maple's heart fell for a boy. Gurjinder Gary Dhaliwal. He was a familiar face in the community, a handsome Punjabi teen from a well-known, respected local family who was 2 years older than Maple, but had attended the same high school as her. In those early days of young love, Gary was confident and attentive, going out of his way to make Maple feel special in his pursuit of her. He wooed her with grand romantic gestures straight out of a movie. Bouquets of roses and boxes of chocolates would appear at the Batalia household, delivered unexpectedly, quote, just because. Maple's parents, seeing their responsible and mature daughter handle first love, chose to be supportive. She's so responsible. Why are we going to interfere more than we needed to? Her sister recalled of their thinking at the time. And soon, Maple and Gary became inseparable, a golden couple in the eyes of their friends. They were self-described foodies, often spotted trying new restaurants hand in hand. On weekends, they might take drives to scenic spots around British Columbia, enjoying nature and each other's company. Maple was glowing. Here she was, excelling in school and on runways, and also in love with the boy who showered her with affection. In those teenage years, it felt like a fairy tale. Over years, though, as Maple's star ascended, Gary's path diverged. After high school, while Maple headed to university to chase her medical dreams, Gary decided to forego college. He went to work for his father's trucking business instead. And while there's nothing unusual about that choice, it did mean that his daily life suddenly looked very different from Maple's lecture halls and labs. Over time, subtle changes crept into their relationship. The same qualities that made Maple shine, her drive, her talent, her light, began to bring out something else in Gary. He wasn't particularly ambitious about school or career at that point, and as Maple racked up accomplishments, friends noticed he didn't really celebrate her success. In fact, he seemed resentful. Quote, Gary was jealous. He wasn't happy for her like a boyfriend that loves her should be, Maple's friend Natalie Sheck later observed. He was really jealous of her light because he didn't have that light in him, she said. Behind closed doors, Gary's behavior grew more controlling. He would check on Maple constantly, wanting to know who she was with, where she was going, and when she'd be back. If Maple mentioned a male classmate or a colleague from a modeling gig, Gary's suspicion would suddenly take over. At first, Maple tried to ignore these flashes of possessiveness. She was young, in love, and hoped it was just normal jealousy that would fade. But as months passed, Gary's temper flared more and more often. Small disagreements turned into shouting matches. Several times, Maple confided to friends that Gary's jealousy was suffocating her, that he hated when anyone or anything else took her attention.
How long has it been to their relationship by this point?
So they started dating at 15 and she's 19 now, but it was pretty on again, off again.
Even in the high school years?
Even in their high school years,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. So I mean, I thought it was a nice, stable relationship until college.
I think it was just two conflicting personalities. And again, I don't exactly know when the on again, off again stage
Sure.
began, but it just seems like there were disagreements. He was controlling.
Sure.
And at some point, the relationship kind of took this turn.
And in this, do we know in this on again, off again thing, have they had different partners?
We don't know of any that she has had, but we'll just get to what Gary's been up to. Still, though, she persevered in the relationship, hoping that the sweet boy who once left flowers on her doorstep would reappear. But by the summer of 2011, 4 years into this on-again, off-again young romance, Maple had had enough. That turning point came in August, a moment that shattered whatever remained of her trust. Maple discovered that Gary had been cheating on her. The news hit her like a punch to the gut. Here was the man who hounded her about her friendships and her whereabouts, betraying her behind her back. Maple was heartbroken, but also angry, and for once, sure of her next decision. She decided to end the relationship for good. At 19, Maple was ready to move on with her life, and that life did not include this possessive cheat. She told him, in plain and simple terms, this was over. But no matter how plain and simple Maple's decision was, Gary did not take the breakup well. In fact, unwilling to let her go is an understatement for his reaction. He unraveled. As Maple tried to begin a new semester at SFU and focus on her studies and modeling, Gary began to relentlessly badger her with phone calls and texts. Day and night, her cell phone lit up with his name. He oscillated between pleading apologies and anger-fueled rants. At all hours, he messaged her, "I'm sorry, take me back," would shift to, "How dare you ignore me?" Maple, hurt and exhausted, mostly stopped responding, which only seemed to fuel Gary's desperation. He sent her thousands of text messages in the span of a few weeks, an avalanche of digital harassment that left Maple anxious and emotionally drained. But worse, Gary also began showing up wherever Maple was. Friends reported seeing his car cruise by Maple's house at odd hours. Maple spotted him parked down the street from her family's home more than once. It felt like she was being stalked by the person who once said he loved her. The situation was quickly becoming scary and dangerous, and Maple knew it. She confided in her older sister and close friends that Gary's behavior scared her now. She tried to never walk alone on campus and kept pepper spray in her handbag just in case. But Maple didn't yet seek a formal restraining order. Part of her still hoped Gary would finally just accept the breakup and leave her alone. But that hope was gone one September afternoon of 2011. Maple had met up with a male friend for a coffee at a local cafe, trying to rebuild a normal social life. Suddenly, Gary stormed into the shop, having somehow learned where Maple was. His eyes zeroed in on Maple chatting with this friend, and something just snapped. He marched up to their table, so much anger on his face, and began shouting at Maple in front of everyone. He was yelling at me. "What are you doing? Do you like this guy?" Maple later said, describing the outburst. Observers at the restaurant turned to stare at the public spectacle as Gary's shouting echoed through the cafe. Maple's friends stood up to intervene, but Gary's anger was focused solely on Maple. Before she could fully react, he shoved Maple. He shoved her so hard that her chair skid and Maple nearly fell. Quote, "He finally just pushed me," she recounted, her voice shaking in an interview. Quote, "I was really shaking and was really scared," end quote.
Aishwarya, these quotes of Maple, who is she saying this to? Where are we getting these quotes from?
She ended up filing a restraining order to the police. So this is in her account to the police.
Wow.
Yeah.
This reminds me of something this NYU professor Scott Galloway said, and it really stuck out to me, that the most dangerous person in the world is a lonely, unemployed man. And this to me is many guys find themselves in a situation where they're at the wrong end of the breakup. But if you are lonely and unemployed, only then do you have the means to do things like stalking. And this
Correct. You're working for your
over-index-
father's business where you're not
which
really
you're not
held
really
accountable.
yeah, and you're not working. I don't think this guy's working. But anyway, this to me is just, I mean, this is a scary person. Like an unemployed, lonely man is a scary person because of, and that needs addressing. But in this case, of course, it is leading to all of this.
And to just imagine that this is someone younger than us. We've kind of now reached the point in Desi Crime episodes where a lot of these characters can be younger than us and
Yeah.
it's not absurd anymore.
Yeah.
Back when we just started the podcast, you were 20
Yeah,
and someone
yeah.
younger than 20 usually is not at the end of, committing these crimes. But now sometimes this man is in his early 20s, he's 22, 23, and it's just so terrifying
Yeah.
how much he's scaring this young girl.
No, I'd be scared as a guy.
Yeah.
I mean, I can only imagine what I can't, but yeah, it's scary. And just what something people don't understand is how your social life gets uprooted because of the fear
Right.
of what that person might do, which they may not do. So many of these cases will never become Desi crime stories because there was
Nothing
no
happened.
violence at the end, so nothing happened. But that cannot obfuscate the reality of that
That there will be
woman's
one in
experience.
there. And
Regardless, those women that it just feels, I can't walk out, I can't do this, I can't. No guy after a breakup, 99.9% of guys after a breakup don't experience the fear of stepping out.
Right.
And I know personally a couple of women who after toxic breakups have feared for being stalked and stuff like that. So it's, yeah.
Insane. In that moment, Maple truly feared what Gary might do. It was the cafe owner who threatened to call the police, and that seemed to be the only thing that stopped him, after which he backed off and stormed out. Maple was left trembling, in tears, apologizing to her friend for the scene. But it wasn't her fault and she knew that. And so, like I said, this time she took action. She went to the RCMP and reported Gary's assault and harassment. At last, the law intervened. Gurjinder Gary Dhaliwal was arrested for the assault and, crucially, ordered to stay away from Maple. A no-contact order was put in place, meaning that Gary was forbidden from coming near Maple or communicating with her in any form. For the first time in weeks, Maple felt a small measure of relief. Her stalker ex-boyfriend had been put on notice by authorities. Maple's family hoped this would be the wake-up call Gary needed to finally leave her alone. But if we know anything, 200 Desi Crime episodes later, is that restraining orders are just pieces of paper. They cannot physically stop a determined killer. The ink on the no-contact order was barely dry when Gary began thinking. He was furious at Maple for breaking up, furious at the humiliation of being arrested and warned off. In his mind, if he couldn't have Maple, no one else could. Just 3 days after police told Gary Dhaliwal to stay away from Maple Batalia, he decided it was time and called a close friend, Gursimar Bedi, to orchestrate a plan. As Maple focused on school, likely thinking the worst was behind her, Bedi was quietly turning her campus into a hunting ground. The stage was set and she had no idea. The night of September 27th, 2011 began as any other for any other student across Canada. Maple was on her campus for her late night study session. At some point in the night, perhaps to keep themselves awake, Maple and her friend Karen, who was studying with her, took a short break around midnight to grab a coffee at a nearby cafe. Unbeknownst to them, in the shadows of the night, they were being watched. A white Dodge Charger sat idling, its distinctive racetrack-style taillights glowing in the darkness. Inside that car were Gary Dhaliwal and Gursimar Bedi, and they were on the hunt. Now, as the two young women returned to their library from the coffee shop, the car slunk back into the parking lot, waiting for Maple to call it a night. Sometime after 1 a.m., Maple finally decided to head home. She parted ways with her friend at the campus entrance, each of them walking to their own cars. Maple, likely tired and unaware of any danger, headed into the multi-level parking structure alone. This was exactly the opportunity her stalker had been waiting for. High above on the third level, the white Dodge Charger was already parked in a quiet corner. As Maple's footsteps echoed through the structure, a figure emerged from behind a pillar. In the still of the night, Maple didn't notice anything amiss until it was too late, until the muzzle of a 9mm handgun flashed in the dark and bullets tore into her. Maple screamed and fell as her assailant, Gary, closed in, knife in hand. What happened next took mere seconds. He slashed her again and again in a frenzy of rage. And then he was gone, bolting to the Charger and racing out of the garage. A surveillance camera captured the white Dodge Charger speeding away from the campus immediately after the gunshots, its unique tail lights unmistakable on the grainy footage. Unfortunately, despite the best efforts of first responders we saw earlier, Maple's injuries were simply too many and too grave. She was pronounced dead shortly after reaching the hospital. In the sterile, fluorescent-lit hallway, RCMP Sergeant Tyner Gillies had the terrible duty of informing Maple's family of her fate. Maple's parents and sister arrived at the hospital hoping for a miracle, only to be confronted with the worst news imaginable. Upon hearing that her beautiful daughter had not survived, Maple's mother Sarbjeet broke down. She grabbed Sergeant Gillies by the back of his head, pulled his forehead to hers, and screamed through her sobs, "Bring me vengeance." The raw pain and anger in a mother's cry for justice hung in the air. Maple's father, Harkirat Harry Batalia, stood in shock, tears streaming down his face. "Our beautiful little child is lost forever," he managed to utter the moment he learned Maple was gone. In that instant, the Batalia family's world shattered. Quote, "We are right now very downtrodden people living in this house with no lights, as our angel is not with us," Harry would later say, describing the darkness of their loss. But even as the Batalias mourned, they were determined about one thing: the monster who did this must be caught. And from the start, they harbored a very clear suspicion. "We really want justice," Maple's mother Sarbjeet said simply, careful not to name names publicly. But privately, the family was convinced Gary was behind this. They knew of his past threats and obsession. Rosaline, Maple's sister, and Harkirat, Maple's father, also conveyed their suspicions to investigators, and they weren't alone. The police themselves considered Dhaliwal a person of interest from day one. However, believing someone is guilty and proving it are two very different things. The RCMP's Integrated Homicide Investigation Team now faced the task of building an airtight case to actually deliver justice. Detectives began by scouring the campus for evidence. In the blood-stained parkade, forensic teams noted the pattern of shell casings in the arc of Maple's blood splatter. The brutality of the crime spoke volumes. Added to that, investigators immediately retrieved security camera footage from around the university, but as if right out of a bad thriller movie, the one camera that covered the section of the garage where Maple was attacked had panned away just seconds before the murder, capturing only an empty stretch of concrete at the moment of the crime. The killer had slipped into a blind spot. But the detectives refused to be discouraged. Other cameras on campus had caught something: that white Dodge Charger. It appeared on footage at multiple points in the night. Earlier in the evening, a camera recorded the Charger creeping behind Maple and Karen as they walked to get coffee, almost as if stalking them. And not long after the attack, a camera at an exit road captured the same white Charger peeling out of the parking lot at high speed. Now, this car was no ordinary vehicle. Like I said, its rear lights had a distinctive racing stripe pattern. Investigators quickly recognized it as a newer model of the Dodge Charger, likely a 2010 or 2011, and put out requests to local dealerships and motor vehicle records for any white Chargers matching that description, because police knew that their suspect didn't own one. And then a breakthrough came quickly. Records showed that just days before Maple's murder, a white 2011 Dodge Charger had been rented from an Avis car rental location in Surrey. And the name on the rental agreement caught detectives' attention. It was Gursimar Bedi, a close friend of Gary. This was the first concrete link between Maple's ex-boyfriend and the mysterious getaway car. Surveillance footage from the Avis rental office provided even more. Video showed Gary himself accompanying Bedi when Bedi picked up the car. The two men were together, renting the exact model of car seen fleeing the murder scene, evidence that this was a premeditated plan. Acting quickly, investigators located the rented Charger. In fact, Bedi had already returned it to Avis, likely hoping to wash his hands of the evidence. A tow truck hauled the white car to the forensic lab before Avis could even clean it, and technicians combed through the vehicle inch by inch. And there it was, evidence of Maple's murder in the car, even though she had never entered the car. Under the hood, nestled in the engine compartment, inspectors found a single 9mm shell casing, the same caliber as the casings recovered at the parkade. It seemed that during the chaos of the shooting, a spent shell had bounced and gotten lodged under the hood. But that wasn't all. In the car's interiors, forensics discovered 2 small drops of blood. DNA tests confirmed the blood was Maple Batalia's, possibly having dripped from the bodies of one of her killers. And as if that weren't incriminating enough, traces of gunpowder were detected on the steering wheel and the driver's side door, gunshot residue as it's called, indicating a firearm had been fired by someone inside the car. Each clue by itself was strong, but together they were conclusive. This was the getaway car used in Maple's murder, and Bedi and Gary had been in it. As the evidence mounted, investigators carefully pieced together the night's events too. Surveillance footage showed that on the night of September 27th, Gursimar Bedi was not merely sitting in the car, he was actively aiding Gary. Cameras caught Bedi stepping out of the passenger side of the Charger and entering an SFU campus building hours before the shooting. He wasn't there to study, he was there to keep tabs on Maple. In fact, video later showed Bedi even following a male friend of Maple's out of the library just minutes before Maple was killed. This revealed the coordination of the plan. Bedi acted as Gary's lookout and enforcer. When Maple's male friend left, a friend Gary irrationally suspected was her new love interest, Bedi tailed that friend to make sure Maple was isolated. With Maple now alone, Gary lay in wait by her car, armed and ready to attack. But despite these powerful pieces of the puzzle, one crucial element was needed to secure charges, placing Gary himself at the crime scene at the exact time of the murder. For that, the police turned to cell phone records. Gary, like most people, carried his phone everywhere. Investigators obtained court orders for his mobile phone's location data and text logs, and in the ensuing months, technicians pored over the data before they finally struck gold. Gary's phone pinged cell towers in the immediate vicinity of SFU Surrey precisely during the window of Maple's murder, shortly after 1 a.m. Moments later, the phone's signal was tracked speeding away from the area, consistent with the path of the Charger fleeing the scene. The digital evidence placed Gary at the scene of the crime and on the move right after. This was the final piece investigators needed. 14 long months after Maple's life was brutally taken, law enforcement made their move. On December 1st, 2012, Surrey RCMP announced the arrest of 20-year-old Gurjinder Gary Dhaliwal and 22-year-old Gursimar Singh Bedi. Gary was charged with first-degree murder, indicating police and prosecutors believed Maple's killing was planned and deliberate. Bedi, the loyal friend, was charged with manslaughter, accessory after the fact, and for firearm offences. Finally, the community which had held candlelight vigils in Maple's memory breathed a collective sigh of relief. Little did they know, however, that the road to justice was just beginning. A road that would wind on for years through the slow mechanics of the legal system and the raw emotions of a family seeking closure. With Gurjinder Gary Dhaliwal and Gursimar Bedi behind bars awaiting trial, the Batalia family got ready for a prolonged fight in court. The charges against Gary, first-degree murder, meant the Crown was preparing to prove that he had planned Maple's killing. If convicted on that count, he would face an automatic life sentence with no parole for 25 years, the harshest punishment in Canadian law. Bedi, meanwhile, stood accused of manslaughter for allegedly participating in the killing and being an accessory after the fact for helping Dhaliwal before and after the murder.
The guilty verdict against Mr. Bedi should be a reminder to anyone engaging in crime, no matter what their role is in the crime, they will be held responsible.
But Bedi pleaded not guilty, and his lawyers would argue he never intended for Maple to be harmed. In fact, both young men maintained their innocence publicly, despite the mountain of evidence against them. As often happens, the legal process dragged on slowly. Preliminary hearings, evidence disclosure, and legal maneuvering meant that years passed with Maple's family attending one court date after another. Quote, "My life is pointless now. Everything feels like a burden," Maple's mother Sarbjeet said at one hearing, describing the agony of sitting through delay after delay. The family's patience and faith in the justice system were tested to the breaking point. Yet they persevered, Maple's father and sister appearing in court regularly, clutching each other's hand for strength. And then finally, in early 2016, 4.5 years after Maple's murder, a trial date was in sight for Gurjinder Dhaliwal in the British Columbia Supreme Court. Phew, right? Finally! Wrong, because on March 3rd, 2016, in a dramatic turn, everything changed. Gary Dhaliwal, now 24 years old, unexpectedly entered a guilty plea to second-degree murder. The plea deal meant the first-degree charge was dropped. In exchange, Gary accepted responsibility for killing Maple, but without admitting premeditation. It was a, quote, surprise guilty plea, as journalists called it, catching even Maple's family off guard.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, don't even get started.
You have a gun on you.
This made me want to pull my hair out.
No, but what kind of why would the state accept this?
That I don't fully
No,
understand.
also, why would you accept this if you have waited 4.5 years to prove first-degree homicide? If you're getting this guilty plea within, let's say, 6 months of the crime occurring, I see the argument of preventing the family of the victim the burden of going through the court.
Correct.
And so cutting a
You've
deal.
put him to so much. Also, why is he suddenly saying this now? He's himself kind of gone through 4 years in the ringer.
No, but I'm okay. I'm sure alleged criminals and the defense does this often when they're realizing that it's closing in. They'll try to cut a deal.
Did they not know it was closing in?
I'm surprised the state accepted it.
Yeah.
Why would you accept
To
it?
me, this is ridiculous on all fronts. I can't make sense of it from any party's
No, I think
vantage.
from the defense, I think it makes perfect sense.
Why?
You delay the case as long as you can.
But that's not helping your convict be out of prison in any case. The quickest way to be out is either you accept a plea quick and begin your sentence.
No, I think
Or you
I
begin
don't
trial.
think I don't think the defense at any point was trying to prove the client, in this case him, innocent.
No, not that. But to have him out of prison as fast as they can is their end goal.
Yeah,
right?
but I think delaying this is a way of ensuring that the family and the state are like, oh my, let's cut a deal. Like, we're so tired of the court proceedings, we're just happy with the deal. Just get a deal.
Possibly.
Maybe,
Sure.
like, I'm just, playing literally devil's advocate here.
Right.
As to what they could have thought. But why would the state, unless Maple's family said,
We're tired.
We're
Which they
tired.
didn't, because they expressed disappointment in what has just happened.
Exactly.
So I don't know.
And also, this is the state, this is the state leading the case. It's not the parents,
Correct.
technically.
It's not. So if anyone has any
This
logic,
is mine. Please, yeah, I mean...
lawyers in
any legal folks listening, what's the positive argument for the state's decision to accept this plea deal? Because to me, it's ridiculous. Also,
little
what's
bit absurd.
the punishment now that he's going to get?
There's a range on it, and a 2-judge panel is going to decide that. So we'll get to that. It was weird, like Aryaan said. After years of professing innocence, Gary Dhaliwal had finally said it. I did it. A week later, on March 7, 2016, the courtroom in New Westminster was packed for Dhaliwal's sentencing and hearing. The Batalia family and friends filled the rows, many clutching tissues and wearing purple, Maple's favorite color. One by one, they delivered gut-wrenching victim impact statements describing the void Maple's death had left in their lives. At one point, Maple's mother turned to face Gary directly, the young man who had once sat at her dinner table as Maple's boyfriend, and she cried out, "Why? Why did you kill my Maple?" Dhaliwal stared down at his hands, expressionless, as Maple's mother begged for an answer that never came. Maple's father, Harry Batalia, then rose to speak. In a trembling voice, he told the court that no father should ever have to bury his child. Turning towards the silent figure of Gary, Harry's tone changed. "Gary, you may have hurt us, but you have not defeated us. One day you will have to answer to Maple," he said. "Your actions are unforgivable," he added quietly before stepping down. Many in the courtroom were openly weeping by then. Even seasoned court reporters found themselves crying. When it was his turn to speak, Gurjinder Dhaliwal finally stood, unfolding a piece of paper with trembling hands. In a low, strained voice, he read a brief statement. He apologized to the Batalia family and Maple's friends for what he had done, admitting he had committed a terrible act. He also apologized to his own family for the shame his actions brought on them. It was not a dramatic display. Those who were there described his demeanor as subdued, perhaps even genuinely remorseful. But Maple's family struggled to feel pity. The wound was too deep. Under Canadian law, second-degree murder carries a mandatory life sentence, but the period of parole ineligibility can vary from 10 to 25 years. In Gary's case, Crown Prosecutor Wendy Stephen and the defense had jointly recommended a hefty 21-year parole ineligibility. This was an unusually high figure for a second-degree plea, but the judge, Justice Terry Schultz, agreed to the joint submission. He acknowledged on record that 21 years before any chance of parole was warranted because of the aggravating factors that made Maple's murder so horrific, that Maple Batalia was killed for exercising her freedom to choose by a man who refused to accept that choice.
I just want to add here that now the decision makes more sense to me. If it was already figured out in the negotiations prior between
that it was going to be
that
long
it was
anyway.
going to be a long. So if the defense had agreed with the state that the ineligibility will be up to 21 years, to me that 4-year difference of a first degree homicide, second degree homicide kind of is mitigated.
And saving trial for the family.
Saving trial for the family,
Correct.
yeah. So I don't think what that extra sense of justice that 4 years extra would bring, I think
maybe it would just be a figurative statement, if it does anything at all, that you
Yeah.
got the highest that there is to get.
I get that, but I think
Yeah.
I think the family would have preferred after 4.5 years just
I don't know. I don't know what
Yeah.
it's like to be parents of
Yeah.
maybe symbolic justice does mean something. I don't
I
know.
guess, yeah.
And so Gary Dhaliwal's sentence was pronounced. Life in prison with no possibility of parole for 21 years. It was one of the longest minimums ever agreed to for a second-degree case, effectively keeping him locked up until at least his mid-40s. As the sentence was read, Maple's sister felt a wave of conflicted relief. Outside the courthouse, she told reporters, quote,
Maple can finally rest in peace knowing that she got some justice.
"Maple can finally rest in peace, knowing she got some justice. But I felt like a chance of parole after 21 years still gives Gary a good chance at life. And the measly couple months that his friend got was a smack in the face," end quote. That measly sentence Rosaline referred to was the outcome for Gursimar Bedi, whose own trial concluded about a year later. In May 2016, partway through Bedi's trial, the Crown acknowledged it could not prove Bedi had known Dhaliwal intended to kill Maple, meaning the manslaughter charge would not stick. The focus then fell on Bedi's role after the murder. In June 2016, Justice Terence Schultz, the same judge, found Gursimar Bedi guilty of being an accessory after the fact to Maple Batalia's murder. The verdict implied that while Bedi may not have wielded the gun or knife, he had knowingly assisted Dhaliwal in the aftermath, helping destroy evidence and providing extensive support to the killer. As Crown Counsel Wendy Stephen put it, Bedi was effectively Gary's, quote, eyes and ears throughout the planning and cover-up. The judge agreed, noting that Gary, quote, could have killed Batalia at some other place in time, but he was able to do so at that moment directly because of Bedi's role, end quote. In January 2017, Gursimar Bedi was sentenced. Prosecutors had asked for 6 years in prison, given how integral his assistance was to the crime, but the judge opted for far less, 18 months in jail. With credit for time served and standard parole, Bedi walked out of prison after only 12 months behind bars. For Maple's family, this was a hard pill to swallow. They were outraged that a man who had helped orchestrate Maple's death would serve barely a year. Where are my rights? Where are Maple's rights? Where are my family's rights? Maple's sister demanded to know when Bedi was released early. Despite these frustrations, in the eyes of the law, the case of Maple Batalia's murder was finally resolved. Gurjinder Gary Dhaliwal would spend potentially 2 decades or more in prison for his deadly act of obsession, and Gursimar Bedi, though lightly punished, had a felony conviction attached to his name forever. In the years since Maple's death, her family has worked tirelessly to ensure her light endures. At Christmas 2011, just 3 months after losing Maple, the Batalias established the Maple Batalia Memorial Award, a bursary for young South Asian women aspiring to careers in the performing arts or modelling, the very dreams Maple had pursued. They also set up a scholarship fund for female students in health sciences at SFU, honouring Maple's goal of becoming a dermatologist. Quote, "My parents feel it's important that another girl, someone else's daughter, gets the opportunities that Maple did not," Rosaline explained. The community helped raise tens of thousands of dollars, and each year on Maple's birthday, a deserving student received support in her name. A commemorative bench and tree were installed in Holland Park near the Batalia home, a quiet place where anyone can sit and feel Maple's presence. In 2019, a local filmmaker also announced plans for a movie about Maple's life and death, determined to tell her story so that lessons could be learned and her memory kept alive. On what would have been Maple's 20th birthday, her father Harkirat stood before a crowd at a memorial event, clutching a framed photograph of his daughter. Through tears, he spoke words that rang with both sorrow and spiritual comfort. Quote, "Because you cannot count the maple tree leaves of this universe, Maple's soul will never die. She is always in our heart." End quote. And indeed, like the countless leaves of the maple tree, the love and inspiration Maple Batalia gave to those who loved her cannot be quantified or extinguished. Maple Batalia's story endures in memory, in community, and in the legacy she leaves behind.
If you like what we do here at Desi Studios and absolutely love what we're wearing today, this is merch you can go buy all for yourself.
You can buy this Desi Crime merch in our YouTube store on the link down below at Kadak Merch. Keep the engines at Desi Studios rolling so we can pay our videographer right behind the camera to make these amazing episodes just for you.